Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator. I'm all about capturing and curating career and life stories as a meaningful way to celebrate a milestone moment like a big O birthday, anniversary, retirement, or graduation. And I'm at my best when curating photo books that move your memories from the basement or your phone or your computer to the coffee table, giving you and your family and friends access to these treasured memories for years to come. I also love curating and capturing life and career stories through this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? It's a series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing Joyce Feustel. Welcome, Joyce.
Hey there.
And Joyce is a social media trainer, and her business name is Boomer's Social Media Tutor. So that gives you a little bit of insight onto what she does, but also for who. So this is going to be pretty fun. Joyce and I have talked already. I think we had a half hour scheduled our first meeting, and we went about an hour and a half into it. So I'll really have to manage our time today. Before we jump into today's interview, let's hear a word from our sponsor, Life Story Curator, a testimonial from one of their very happy clients.
Oh my gosh, if you're considering hiring Kathy Lawless to do a book for you, you need to do it. My name is Ann DuPont, and I'm Chair Emeritus of a nonprofit that's been based in Denver called the Leadership Investment. And after 20 plus years of being in business, we decided we had to celebrate and commemorate all of the great work we'd done and the impact we'd had in the Denver community. So we hired Kathy Lawless and Life Story Curator to help us do exactly that. And I've got to tell you, the result has been simply outstanding. We went into it with a little bit of fear, thinking, is this going to be too much work? Can we really take this on? And Kathy just made it absolutely painless. She was fun. She was creative. She broke the work into bite-sized pieces that we could really take hold of and get done. And she just made it a lot of fun. We had a lot of laughter along the way. And the feedback from the members of our organization, from the staff, the community, the volunteers, has simply been outstanding. It has really done quite a remarkable job of capturing the essence of everything we achieved over 20 years. So if you're thinking about doing something like this for your organization, for your career, for your family, I would highly recommend it, and I would absolutely say that Kathy Lawless and Life Story Curator is the person for you.
So, Joyce, before we get into what it means to be a social media trainer, always like to start with the icebreaker questions. So if you would, tell the audience where you grew up, what kind of part of the country or world, and a little bit about your birth order, your siblings, and how you think kind of both those things shaped you as an adult.
Okay, so I'm from northern Wisconsin, well, maybe north central Wisconsin. Picture Green Bay, the Packers.
Many had to throw that in, huh?
We always used that back in the 60s as a good locator. So our dairy farm, where I grew up, is 50 miles due west of Green Bay and sort of northwest of Milwaukee. And I went to school in a town of 1,000 people. So there were just a few hundred people in my high school class. So it was a small farming community where I grew up. I was born in 1948, oldest of four, youngest born in 55, 2 girls and then 2 boys. I would say the birth order impacted me because I'm used to being in charge, being the oldest of 4. And sometimes that can actually be very annoying because people don't necessarily appreciate me always saying, oh, let's do that, or let's go here, or whatever. So I have to cool my jets sometimes. Yeah, the good thing about that is that I have a natural bent for leadership and getting things done and helping facilitate groups. And yeah, so I think overall it served me very well.
Yeah.
Also, I think often the firstborn is kind of that cheerleader of the family. No pressure, or there is pressure sort of. It helped me get good grades. It helped me have a good work ethic. That and just the farm itself gives you a work ethic.
Absolutely. Well, it's that burden of the firstborn that you just, I through this whole interviewing process, I've gotten to appreciate the different dynamics between birth order. It's been really fascinating. I love the question. And so, yeah, I will tell you, I can't tell you how many number one, it's been a disproportionately high number of my interviewees are firstborn. And I don't know why that is, but it seems like almost everybody's a firstborn.
It could have to do with that leadership tendency, like make it happen. And one other little thing about birth order that I find interesting before we move on is you'll hear middle child, like you are a middle child. I think.
I'm a middle.
However, in a family of 4, let me tell you, my sister who's second is very different than my brother who is third. So I think that middle child stuff doesn't really work in some families. So I took actually a little class back in the mid 80s where a lady did her whole PhD research on first, second, third, and fourth. And then if you have a big family, apparently the fifth born is like a firstborn. They just recycle those roles. So, we could spend another 40 minutes just talking about that, but I thought I'd just throw it out for those listeners that are from a family of 4 or 5, 6, that where the middle child thing doesn't always work.
Well, yeah, I can't. I mean, I do think that's very interesting when you think about a family that is 6 or 7 or 8 people. Mm-hmm. There's 4 or 5 middles, right? So now how do it's a different middle. It's very different.
Oh, yeah.
What does that look like? So, yeah, it is fascinating. I probably need to do a little bit more studying on that. But what activities did you do then? It sounds like you're on the farm. Maybe you didn't have time being the oldest and being on a farm, but did you do anything fun?
Oh, yeah. Especially by high school or even in I would say middle school, I got to play my clarinet. So I started playing the clarinet in 6th grade. You were talking about your sister in the marching band. So I was in the band all through high school, the marching band. It was wonderful. So that was great. And then I also was in plays. I worked on the yearbook. My parents were really great about encouraging us to do extracurriculars. And luckily, our grandparents lived in town. So we could go after school and have dinner with them and hang out there and then walk back to the high school a mile away. And then my parents would come and collect us after the activity. So that way I did get to do more than some farm kids got to do, for sure. Well, and help when I got my driver's license. Then I had my dad and mom got me a car so that I had my own wheels.
Yeah, then you got to be independent. I was going to say it's probably good that you could be with grandparents to keep you out of trouble. But then you got your own car and then probably that would have to go, huh?
Yeah.
All righty. Well, would you say you're an introvert, extrovert, or an ambivert?
Off the chart extrovert.
Off the chart. Okay. It's also kind of normal that firstborn seems to be a lot of extroverts too. Mm-hmm. All right. And then how about on the fun meter on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato and 5 being the life of the party? Where do you put yourself?
Between 4 and 5, I'd say. Sometimes even at the end of a tutoring session, which you wouldn't think would be fun, people without being prompted will say, that was kind of fun. I'm like, yep, I get that.
So it's not about, it's about creating the fun as well as being fun, right? Mm-hmm. Both of that. Cool. All right. Well, then on the risk meter, scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low risk taker, 5 high risk taker, where do you put yourself?
Probably about a 4. Of course, I would say this is mitigated by the fact that I'm married to a guy with a pension, because so I have financial security in the husband and have from day one, really. So therefore, I think I am more free to take risks. But yes, I like to take risks.
Oh, that is interesting. That so much factors into that question, right? That people don't know. All we hear is the answer, and there's probably about 17 things behind it that's driving it. So, but I do like all of those questions because it really gives us some insight into who you are as a person. So that as we start getting into your story, we're like, oh, well, she's like me, or oh, I couldn't be like that because she's way more risky or whatever. But I also take the liberty of upping people's risk factor. When they say they're a 4 or 5, and then you hear some of the stories, I'm like, wait a minute, that's more like an 8 or a 9. So, but it's my podcast. I get to make up the rules. So.
You make the rules.
Well, so Joyce, tell us a little bit about what you do today as a social media trainer, and then we'll get into how did I get here?
Okay, no. Well, as a social media trainer, I help people, especially people 55 and up, that baby boomer crowd, with their LinkedIn profile, to get it ship-shape, to make it really shine and represent them well. And then furthermore, I help them with the functionality of LinkedIn, what the settings are and how to post and how to search. And it isn't just the 55 and up that's part of my target market, it's what they do for a living. So primarily my people are business owners, or they might work in business development, entrepreneurs, however you want to describe that business owner entrepreneur terminology. And then there's roughly around 20% that are job seekers. So those are the main people I help. Now, secondarily, I help with Facebook. So right now it's maybe something like, again, on the 80-20 rule, 80 LinkedIn or even 85%, and then another, say 15% on Facebook, a tiny bit Instagram. Facebook, of course, for business primarily. Though on occasion, I've been tapped to teach kind of Facebook 101 class for the baby boomer retired set. I just finished a 35-page Facebook for beginners user guide for a class that I'll be teaching this month. Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because now they talk about how Facebook is now the baby boomer site, right? Whereas it started out as the young person site, and the baby boomers took it over. So, well, so let's talk about how you got here when you were junior high school on the farm there, when you weren't, in the band or getting in trouble, like you said. What did you want to be when you grew up? I mean, obviously social media didn't exist back then. So I'm guessing you had a different plan.
Well, if anybody's listening and grew up in the 40s and 50s, came of age, say in the middle to late 60s, as a girl, there were very limited options, generally speaking. Teaching and nursing come to mind. And this was also, teaching came up for me, especially because my mom had been a high school home economics teacher. My Uncle Jack was an industrial arts teacher. My Aunt Gretchen taught English. My grandpa was a physics and math teacher and later a principal. So there's a lot of education on that side of the family, my mom's side. So therefore, I figured I'd be a teacher because that made sense to me. I like school and I like reading and helping other people learn. So why not be a teacher? That was my plan.
Yeah, that would make sense. I do know several other families that have that teaching in their DNA, right? And it just fits, and they're really good at it. I mean, it's not only just a profession that their family has gravitated to. There's just something about how they interact with either young people and teaching and training. It's really cool. It's fun to watch. So awesome. So you decided did you go to college then, or?
Oh yeah, I went to college at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, Wisconsin, same place my grandpa went and two of my aunts. And I loved it there. And I did my student teaching, but that didn't go well. 9th grade English, it was kind of ugly. And my cooperating teacher more or less disappeared. And it was traumatic, really. And then I graduated, but I was just the wind went out of my sails in terms of even looking for a job. Plus it was really hard in 71 and early 70s for the boomers to find jobs because there were fewer kids, because there were fewer Gen Xers, fewer kids to teach, I should say. So I ended up hearing about a health education program. So I switched from English, I thought I'll try something else. Maybe it's the field I'm in. So I got a fellowship to get a master's degree in health education, did that. And then I taught school. It was just 1 day a week for a year. But you know what? I just realized I'm too much of a free spirit. I didn't like the rules and the bells and the structure that inherently comes with public school, or most any K through 12 school kind of classrooms lifestyle. It didn't fit me. In fact, I wanted to quit halfway through the year, but my husband, a law student at the time, said, "You signed a contract, honey. You better honor your contract." So because of him, I did honor it. And second semester, I had graduated, I think, from my master's by then, and I got a 4-day-a-week job doing professional development education, actually, for the State Department of Education. Then I got to go around the state teaching grown-ups about how they could structure their classes around drug education to prevent, drug abuse and alcohol abuse. That was far more interesting for me.
Probably not as much rules and
structure.
And,
a lot more fluidity. And then from there, I ended up going to the public health department. The city of Madison had a position, which functionally was almost more like a public information officer, because our nurses were the ones that really were in the schools and did a lot of the actual health education classes, with the kids. So I was more like a support to them in material development and PR spokesperson and a variety of things. I got to serve on different committees, and it was a very, so what I'm looking for, it wasn't a job with a description at all. It was almost too much loosey-goosey. I really didn't have much direction from my manager because he'd never worked with a health educator before. He worked in a smaller health department. And my husband would say, oh, honey, that's so great because you can kind of do whatever you want. I said, yeah, that's true in a way. But you know, when you're 24, 25, 26 in there, you're looking for a little direction, usually, a little mentoring. And so it was okay for that time. Then I thought, oh, you know, maybe I'll go into being a nonprofit agency, like manager or leader, executive director, because I'd always had a lot of, in my big heart for nonprofits. So here's my default has been like, oh, go back to school. So I go back to school. This time the husband paid for it. And so I got a degree, more or less a niched business degree. And then I ran this nonprofit, but that just didn't work out either. So by now I'm like 30, 31 years old, and my husband was after me to have a baby. So that kind of saved my butt because see, then I got pregnant, had a baby, and I was a home mom. And I did a lot of kind of high level, I would call it public policy volunteer work. I was actually even on our county board of supervisors for a time, which in Wisconsin's a part-time legislative official. Much like in Colorado, our citizen legislature, those people aren't full-time legislators. They do it, they're very busy in the winter. But at any rate, so that was kind of what I did through the 80s, League of Women Voters, very active with them, but still not really clear on a career. That's for sure.
Yeah, so it sounds like there was just a variety of opportunities that presented themselves, and they kind of fit within your skill set with all of your education, but all of your training and your ability to say yes to things. It's like, and it sounds like you were, again, back to that risk taker, you're willing to say yes for things that you didn't really know you could do it, right? But
and you know, there's kind of career ladders, if you want to call them that, in volunteer organizations, like the League of Women Voters. You know, I did certain kinds of level of work for them, and then I got onto their board, and then I had a second child, and I thought, oh, I just don't think I want to be on their board anymore. But there were other kind of, I'll call them portfolio specialized roles that I could manage with my two little kids. I mean, one year I was actually a producer of a television program through, you know, those municipal government channels. And so we had law students and others that would gather information. And sometimes I'd be the on-air talent. And sometimes I'd have other people do that. And, you know, I got to actually grill my own mayor and ask him questions and stuff. So that was a lot of fun, to run candidates forums. So really, I would say the League of Women Voters really gave me so many opportunities for writing and research and, you know, just having a public presence, you know, representing the League in different capacities. So it was a good, I'm going to say outlet kind of minimizes it, but a good way to manifest the natural talents that I had.
Yeah. Well, natural talents, but I also want to tap into your maybe natural confidence, you know, to be on air, to be interviewing, to be taking on, like you mentioned, like a public information officer role. You've got to have a certain, you know, set of not only the background and the history, but you also have to have the skill set to be able to present yourself. So where did you get that? Was that part of the master's in teaching?
I would say Toastmasters didn't come about till I came out here when I was in my late 40s. To me, it was my dad as much as anything, and my mom, but almost more my dad. And my dad had been a town board member. My mom was on the library board. My dad was very articulate. You know, he was like the chairman of the church board too. So he had a natural, I would call it extemporaneous speaking ability, not an educated man, yet a very intelligent man and well phrased in how he put things together. Also, I really got a lot of practice when I was as young as junior high in speech contests. And in high school, I competed in forensics up to the state level. So there were all these different events. I wasn't on debate, but like short speeches. We did a play one time. So I had a lot of practice at that level in high school. And my minor in college was speech. I had straight A's in speech. So I would say all my schooling really and my extracurricular all fed into that confidence.
Yeah. Well, and again, with speaking, the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You got to get over that initial fear factor. And then once you do, then you can have fun with it, right? And you can play with it. And then you can, you know, really try to master it versus some of the initial, fear factors just, you know, really paralyze people. And if you can't get past that, I totally get it. So very cool. So, you're touching on public and politics, and I mean, it's funny, you started out as thinking about teacher, and then you totally expanded and, really, really made it, I don't know how to say it, you think big, right? You really moved it in bigger world influence.
Well, here's another little story to bring up too, that is about thinking big. When I was a junior in college, a lady who I knew through my church asked me if I'd like to be part of a pilot group they were establishing at the Faculty Advising Service. And what this was about 1969, and they wanted to have upperclassmen, junior and senior, to be trained to advise the freshmen and sophomores who didn't have a declared major. So they didn't have some advisor. What they'd have to do otherwise is just talk to some random faculty member. And I don't know if they paid those people or just we weren't paid, I know that. But they gave us little offices and we had office hours. And so we would help these students get their schedule put together. Well, it turned out that so many of these students hated our calendar. They would just tell us this unprompted, that they wish we didn't end the first semester after Christmas because they were just spending all this time during Christmas break studying for their first semester exams. And then we wouldn't get out into June, and the kids at the state colleges got out earlier and would beat us to the summer jobs. So our little group of maybe 5 or 6 of us, we just took it upon ourselves to do this big research project. And this is way before the internet, mind you, to find out how other colleges had their calendars. So we came up with some ideas, and we took a proposal to the chancellor of the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus and said, we think this whole matter should be seriously looked into. There should be a student faculty committee and see if we can maybe change this calendar. Well, lo and behold, the chancellor took us up on it, appointed the committee. I and this other guy, Kurt Trinko, got to serve on this committee. What a heady experience as a senior in college, to be elbow to elbow with faculty members. And indeed, the proposal we came up with, which was to start the semester earlier in the fall, and of course, and it would end earlier in May, got adopted, went through the faculty senate and through the Board of Regents. So in a lifetime, Kathy, that is the most important thing I've done, outside of, popping out 2 babies.
Yeah.
Because that just was such an incredible legacy. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because that's one of those situations where, again, you got asked to do something, you're just volunteering, but then you're like, wait a minute, you did have to think big, right? You had to really think about, keep hearing the same thing. Why can't we do something about this? Surely we can do something about this. It doesn't have to stay this way. So,
and this, by the way, was all during the Vietnam era. So some people went out and marched in the streets, and, it wasn't against the war myself, but I found that I'm a person who works from within a structure. And I believe you can change the structure of things. You can change the rules and the way things work if you with the right people and it's for the right reasons. I mean, it was a very formative experience for me.
Yeah. Well, and you also have to kind of speak their language, so they have a listening for you. So like you said, you did the research on what other colleges do. You did the feedback from the students. You put together a proposal, and you did it in a way that was probably professional, or, at least, and calm, and, in a way that's, in a positive manner. Yeah. Wow. Very cool. Well, congratulations. That is a pretty big deal.
I think so. Yeah.
And like you said, it is a legacy because it lives on, right?
Yeah.
Changes for decades and for just thousands of students. That's very cool.
Oh, yeah.
So now you can say to any of those students, you're welcome. You're welcome. So how did you end up getting to Colorado?
Well, what happened is my husband went to law school and became a legislative attorney, writing legislation for Democrats and Republicans. It was, it's a nonpartisan position there in Madison, Wisconsin, working for the state legislature. And during that time, he got real involved with his professional organization, the National Conference of State Legislatures. He would do volunteer workshops for them, teach. He didn't have any paid thing, but would volunteer. He would serve on committees. And by 1995, so this was from 74 to 95, that he worked writing laws, and then he was involved with his group most of that time. And by 95, he was on their board of directors. Well, it happened, there was an opening, a job opening at this National Conference of State Legislatures. Well, he was beloved by these people, and they said, Bruce, you should apply for this job. So he did, and he took, I would say, about a $10,000 a year pay cut for the job. I believe it was the right thing to do, because we could live on that amount. I mean, I was starting to work anyway, which we'll get to. And it was such clearly an incredible opportunity for him to go from being a beloved bill drafter for one legislature to be able to impact, talk about a vision, 50 legislatures, all 50 states. And even he's traveled to Eastern Europe and Asia and Africa, helped Kosovo when they became a country to get their whole legislative operations in place. So that's why we moved from Madison to Colorado, because the headquarters of this organization is here in Denver.
Yeah. What a great example of, sometimes you have to really look at what's the job that I want. What else do I get out of the job? Not just the paycheck, right? And like you're saying, the level of influence and exposure and experience, and then international.
Impact. Oh my gosh. I mean, in a lifetime for him, that was pretty remarkable. So it was hard in a way because the girls were 14 and 11, especially the 14-year-old. That is very awkward and difficult to move a kid that age. Because like you were talking, you moved in high school from one town to another. So at any rate, she managed, it was hard for me because you can see I was kind of a somebody in Madison, Wisconsin, having legal women voters and county board and all that. And to come out here to Lakewood and Denver area, knowing nobody, was really quite wrenching. So I knew that's what it was going to be hard at first, but then I joined Toastmasters about a year later. And that really was an important beginning of a new chapter in my life of being able to do that public speaking, meet a wonderful group of people and be mentored and mentor other people. And it's really been this amazing kind of almost like a sidebar professionally as well as personally. I got into it because I got into sales. So about a year after we got out here, that's when I got into the field of sales through an informational interview.
Ah, well, how, isn't there legal women voters here in Colorado that you could have joined their chapter, or did
here's what I decided to do is to close that chapter. Kind of like a book chapter, that kind of
branch out
chapter.
On something new. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like the League of Women Voters, at least where I lived in Madison, wasn't really getting with the times enough. And it's sort of a long, whole separate story. But I felt like, I just given this group like 20 some years of my life. Mm-hmm. And this time I'm going to stay under the radar. And, I went to an event and they were all, oh, you should join our board. I'm like, oh, never mind. I just never went back. I mean, I went to a few small things. I got really involved for a stretch in the 90s in spiritual education. Thought at one point I might become a minister. So that was really where I put more of my extracurricular activities. Along with Toastmasters, was in taking a lot of different spiritual classes. I didn't go the minister route. By now I'm in my late 40s. Our kids are about to start college. It would have been an economic opportunity cost for me to go that route. And I had this really epiphany that you can do a lot of things spiritually, guiding and helping people without an REV in front of your name. So I thought, maybe that'll be another lifetime if you believe in that kind of thing. But at any rate, yeah. So that was kind of how I made a pivot, if you want to call it.
Pivot. So that's a big transition. So not only did you move states, so you're not physically different, but you're also thinking, I was part of that, organization for so long. It's time for something new. So, but starting something new, not easy, right? And you got to meet new people and network. And so, but you mentioned that now all of a sudden you're in sales. So that's kind of a big shift too, because sales is.
Well, what happened was I was working in AAA. Just kind of fell into that job because I was picking up something for my husband who's doing all that traveling, and it was down at one of the AAA branch offices. And I was telling the lady I was new to town. She said, "Are you looking for a job?" I said, "Well, actually, I am." She says, "There's a job opening in customer service with, with I'm gonna say the disabled cars with, where cars need to get towed and you're locked out of your car." Blanking on the name, right? But the point is, it was AAA. In that part of their operation. So I ended up getting a job because she had told me about it and I applied and got the job. And I did that for a year. Well, that was nights, not nice, but it was weekends, a lot of weekends. People's cars break down 24/7. So I had time though during the week because of working a lot of weekends to do informational interviewing. And so what I did is I would go from person to person. Do you know somebody? And I would just kind of rule out whole fields of, work to do. And I was told by somebody that, you're kind of peppy, sort of cheerleader type. You seem like a Chamber of Commerce kind of person. So I got the name of somebody who worked at my own, right here in Lakewood, the local chamber, what was then called the West Chamber, now West Metro Chamber. And so I talked to this lady in charge of membership. She had worked in other chambers. That was so helpful. So she, painted a pretty helpful picture for me. I thought, oh, chambers, that might work. So get this, Kathy, at the end of the hour, she turns to me and said, hey, have you ever thought of going into sales? So it came from her, 1 hour. So she saw a salesperson in me. And I said, well, no. And she said, how would you like to take an aptitude test for sales? I said, well, sure, it can't hurt. My dad, by the way, in the wintertime on the farm, when there's not so much to do, he would sell seed corn, SEED, seed corn to the other farmers. My dad could talk to anybody, anywhere about anything. So, I am kind of hardwired with that sort of sales gene and that kind of help elbow med style. So it must have been coming across to this lady. I take this test. She calls me the next day. You did really well. I'd like to offer you a job. Here, straight commission, working for the chamber, getting us more members. That's how I got into sales. And that was 17 years.
Wow. And you, how did that fit with your confidence level? And were you like, oh, this is going to be really fun? Or were you like, well, I've never done sales before?
I was frankly kind of nervous about it. And that's when I joined Toastmasters. I heard about Toastmasters, which helps people to build their confidence through being better at communicating and leadership. And I thought, man, I'm not doing exactly public speaking, but I'm sitting down with these strangers day after day and hour after hour trying to convince them or help them make a purchase decision. Probably that Toastmaster thing could help. That's what I chose to do. And then, my manager was a big help too. And in other, like the next sales job I had, my manager there would go with me on sales calls and he would help me if I got stuck, and on the way home, he would, coach me on what I could do better.
Yeah.
And that was a Better Business Bureau. It sold for them too.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned you were already doing like these information interviews, which in a way, that's kind of cold calling, right? You had to at least reach out to people to say, hey, can I just talk to you about what you might know about X and X? So
yeah, I think I must have had somebody's name. Maybe somebody I met from the AAA or whoever through church or who knows what, where I would get these names. And then I maybe did a little cold calling, but once you have one name, you can get other names. So that's kind of how it worked out.
Yeah, I love that. Spoken like a true salesperson. Once you have one name, I interviewed one guy and he said, well, I just expected that these executives would take my call. Why wouldn't they? And I was like, wow, my mindset was, why would these executives take my call? And his is, well, why wouldn't they? It's
really a pretty good degree of chutzpah, to be assumptive and not a pushy way. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So that was 17 years then.
Yeah. The way it wrapped up in the end, it was the Chamber of Commerce, and then it was the state chamber and the state nonprofit, and then the Better Business Bureau. And the last stretch was, I'll call it education sales, because I was with the University of Phoenix in the enrollment department. And there, most of the time I was actually calling, it wasn't cold calling, but I was following up with people who inquired, say through an email or something, to schedule them an appointment with their enrollment advisor. So we both were actually trying to call these people, and then I would get that appointment for them. And then the last sales job I had was with the College for Financial Planning. And now I am the enrollment advisor, and I'm talking to people from all over the USA. Again, we're fed leads. We have the phone, you get to answer, oh, you need help? Let me help you, sir. So you have those really warm leads, and people, and our business development team would come back from a conference and we'd have people to call. So it wasn't like I was out, hustling and looking for people. And I was talking to people who are in financial planning and want to get a credential to meet a continuing education requirement, or maybe get a master's degree. They've always wanted that. Or people coming into the field who need to get a certain amount of coursework to get, again, a certificate or the whole certified financial planning credential. So that was the best sales job, because those people were so professional. They valued education. They were kind of salespeople themselves, so they kind of got what I did. And also, it wasn't so much selling marketing or anything like I was before. I was really selling their professional development. So the educator in me loved that part of it too, because I really believe in continuing your education. Yeah, so it was a good fit.
Yeah, I see that. So how did you make your choices to jump from those different organizations? Were you looking for, it's just time for something new?
Or let's see. Okay, so, well, first Lady hired me, right? And then eventually I left there. Oh, there was another sales job I forgot I had after that. I did at times leave a manager just because I didn't want to work for him anymore. I mean, that happened with the Chamber of Commerce, and I went to work for one of our members because he offered me a job. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. But after 6 months, I realized I didn't really want to work for him either. He was a nice man, but the nature of the sales position didn't fit me. And ironically, I went back to my chamber boss and did some kind of part-time, not sales work for him, just some other projects. And then, I don't know, I quit there and I was kind of in between. I think I must have gone to the newspaper. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll look for sales jobs again. And I call up the state chamber. And sure enough, this guy who was filling in for the receptionist was amazing. He says, Joyce Feustel, are you related to Bruce Feustel? I said, well, yeah, it's my husband. He said, oh, I used to work with him. Okay, so that was kind of a shoo-in, to get that job, just kind of going on that, who knows my husband. And also I had an insurance license, which they needed me to have. But then that job didn't work out. There were some, again, issues I had with, you leave a manager, not a company, in my opinion. So then I went to work for one of our members from the state chamber, and we really got crosswise, and then she fired me. So that's a way out of a job, like it or not. And from there, a Toastmaster friend of mine had told me about the Better Business Bureau job. So many of my jobs over my lifetime, from even my very first job, packing parts in a bed part factory, came because my dad knew this guy who knew the owner of the factory. But so there was a lot of that in my 20s. I got the nonprofit job because this guy had that nonprofit, didn't want to run it anymore. He was a friend of my husband's and mine. He said, Joyce, why don't you just take this job? I'll suggest they hire you. So I had somebody kind of grease the skids a little bit, if you want to call it that, in many different situations. Now, the University of Phoenix job, I had been out of work for 9 months, thinking I was going to get out of sales. I had this idea I could do a training job, but I had no training on my resume for paid work. I only had my Toastmasters training, kind of volunteer stuff. But anyway, so finally I gave up on the training. So I thought, okay, so I was in the paper again. This is like what year? 2003, when we still saw jobs in the paper. And I found the University of Phoenix job. And then it turned out that this lady who worked at the local campus is married to another Toastmaster friend of mine. So that was all kind of divine order that she would be like my little kind of pipeline into that place. And then the final one that happened from the University of Phoenix over to this financial planning thing, because the College for Financial Planning at that time was owned by the same company as that owned Phoenix, the University of Phoenix. A gal who was a temp in our enrollment department at the University of Phoenix had an opportunity to go over to the College for Financial Planning and temp for them in their student support department. And she and I, we're close friends, but she had my email and she kind of knew I was looking for another opportunity. So she emails me one day that there was a job opening over there at the college. And I said, I saw that job. I don't know if I really want that. And she says, listen, they promote from within all the time. All the time. And there's a question where it says something about, what is it? What are you most proud of when you look back on your career? And what I frankly am most proud of is that I was willing to be humble and take a position that some might say was beneath me based on my background or my education, because it was a way that I could get a job and be of service and get my ego out of the way. And so I took this job as the associate enrollment advisor. And then within 6 months, just like she said, I got to be promoted to the enrollment advisor. So a lot of that is kind of the right place at the right time with people that look out for you.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny as you were explaining these different companies and relationships. My first thought was, this is so complicated and intertwined. How does anybody ever get a job? And then it is so funny that it's all about relationships and connections and who knows you, but also, you have also with all of these different, my dad's, had a contact, or my husband had a contact or some, but you still have to have the skills or they're not going to hire you.
Yeah.
And so, it is a beautiful thing, but it is something I kept keep looking back on and thinking, how can listeners kind of go, okay, well, what is the message in that? And a big part of that is you have to be out there doing things, meeting people. And like you said, you went to Toastmasters, you went to the chamber, you were doing information interviews. So you look at, there's a lot of activity that you were doing. And then you say, and then I lucked into things. Well, that's because all these activities. we're getting you out there. And you were
Right.
making.
And then actually, my business is kind of the natural extension of all this, because the man, he wasn't the manager who hired me. She went on to another job, and he became our manager. And he'd actually managed me back at the University of Phoenix. So I'd known him pretty well. And in 2010, when I was about halfway through that enrollment advisor job, that's when the college adopted social media. Think 2010, listeners, where you were with your Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I think Instagram was just starting then. So the college had all those first three, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we in enrollment were told by our management they needed us to chat up this new social media, get, likes the Facebook page and followers on Twitter and stuff. And I at 61, get this, because I'd been on social media, at least Facebook and LinkedIn, for over a year, knew enough about it and liked maybe to take the risk, whatever you want to call it, to bring this idea up to our students. Hey, by the way, do you hear we got a Facebook? Oh yeah, well, tell me more. Why don't you like it? Then you'll get, information about our college all the time. And so I would be the best person at getting our students and even potential students to engage with our social media. And my manager was like 35, on the age of his parents, was so struck by this, so like wowed, that one day he said, hey, Joyce, since you're obviously so good at getting our students of the college engaged with our social media, so have you ever thought of helping other people, especially in your baby boomer age group, to understand social media like you do? And that was, it was such a powerful question that he asked me, much like the lady, have you ever thought of going into sales? But also so much more meaningful, because he'd known me for many years. I say he loved me, and he really wanted the best for me. And he didn't mean for me to run right out and, start doing it, but he planted a seed. And every day I'm grateful.
Yeah, and sometimes we need that someone else to see something we can't. It's that competency that we just think other people can do it, and then someone finally points out that, well, no, you're really good at this. And you're like, I am? Or isn't everybody? And then they're like, no. And then you start paying attention to it, and then you start going, wait a minute, how do I step into this strength more than? And it becomes your thing. But sometimes
that's how it worked. And then based on his suggestion, 6 months later, I even formed my business, Boomer Social Media Tutor. I started taking classes and reading books and just getting more engaged in social media. And I would ask my friends from Toastmasters if I could critique their LinkedIn profiles and not charge them, but just like practice. See, because you really have gotten quite a holistic view of my life here. And I didn't want to relive my 20s with the busted careers. I wanted to be pretty clear that this was going to be a good fit for me to help people with their social media. And indeed, it did feel like a good fit.
Yeah.
So that was so heartwarming that it was going well. So 3 years to the month after he planted the seed was when I retired at age 64 then into my business full time. So now it's been just about 8.5 years, a little more than that. And now, of course, I'm 72, and I've just never been this happy as in the last 8.5 years, helping business owners and job seekers, mostly with LinkedIn, but also a little bit the business people with Facebook.
Yeah. What a great journey. It is just weaved through so many things, but then now you've really landed in this happiness space. And that's what's so cool. Now, you also mentioned that you have you've got financial security, which is when you start a business, but I think later in life, the business start isn't always about the financial. It's about what can I be doing to contributing and serving others in a way that really, impacts the world. And you do need to be paid and compensated for the value you're bringing. Absolutely.
Yeah, it should be fair. And see, I feel for me, it's the educator in me that's gotten to come back again, to really help people understand a concept. So once, like you were saying earlier, once you're trained as an educator, I believe, engineer, accountant, whatever you want to call it, then you really that's how you think and how you approach things. So that has really served me well, even though I didn't do it in a traditional way very long. Also, that Toastmasters, all those years, they've helped me to be able to go to any audience, whether it's virtually or in person, and feel at home immediately and pace myself, cover the material in the time allocated, engage with the audience, have a little humor in there. Seriously, I have so much fun with groups. It's just a blast. That's just makes my day. And then also that networking that I kind of learned when I was a little kid and would go with my dad to the female, be just kind of shooting it, whatever, talking to the other farmers and stuff. So that ability to talk to anybody, anywhere about anything. When you have your own business, you're still in sales. You're in sales all the time. So that aspect of that great background in sales and just learning it from my dad, also, it all comes together. It's a whole package.
Yeah. Well, and you're at a place too, you're just appreciating it all too. Probably just very grateful that you found this. And and that boss planted the seed, and you're like, wait a minute, this could be my thing. And then now you're boldly stepping into it. So congratulations, you found it at age 64, 61 to 64, and now you're hitting it out of the park. So
yep.
Well, Joyce, I could keep going probably all afternoon on some more questions, but we probably should start wrapping up. Mm-hmm. And you kind of already summarized a little bit about, this last bit about your dad and all that and the teacher in you, but tell us what you think over your career has served you best. Is it a discipline, a habit, or maybe a personality trait or a strength? What do you think has served you best?
Well, I really appreciate getting these questions in advance. And when I was reviewing them last night, what really came to mind was perseverance. I'd say she was pleasantly perseverant. Combination. You can be perseverant and be really annoying. And if you have the kindness and the friendliness with it, people will say, oh, thanks so much for getting back to me. And I think that's so important. And whether I'm practicing a talk for Toastmasters or whatever it might be. I mean, I will practice now with Zoom over and over again until I feel like, okay, I've got this. And, it may not be perfect, but it's good. And it's good. So I think perseverance, and when I was looking for work, was so critical. 9 long months, but I didn't give up.
Yeah, and you were doing information interviews and reaching out to people you knew, and that is really bold in itself. But like I said, but pleasantly perseverant. I like it because you're right, because you can be a pest. I mean, perseverance can cross into pest, I guess, if you're not pleasant about it and have the right personality. So. Awesome. Well, then last question, any words of wisdom that impacted you over your career or that maybe you like to either say to yourself or as someone has said to you, but any words of wisdom that you'd like to share?
Well, I do have this quote and then I have one other thought. It's Henry David Thoreau, go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you have imagined. So go confidently in the direction of your dreams and live the life you've imagined. So to me, that's a very hopeful quote. And it's the direction of your dreams and live the life you've imagined. I think it just is so beautiful. And I think be open to opportunities. And we've kind of touched on that here and there. Be open to moving across the country to a town you've never lived in. Be open to going back to work when you've been a home mom and your minister says, hey, I'm looking for an administrative assistant. Are you interested? Really? Okay. Be open to a whole career when someone says, have you ever thought of going into sales or doing something and something still kind of new, social media? Have you thought of helping, be willing to learn and embrace new concepts because then people are like, wow, that's so cool. At her age, she understands that. So then you're a role model too to other people because you didn't just sit back on the couch. You really were proactive.
Yeah. Well, and I can see how, you could have really, let kind of the mainstream world get into your mindset about, well, no, social media is for the millennials or it's, you know what I mean? And so that's, I'm good at it, boss, but this isn't something I really want to specialize in. But you kind of went, no, you know what? I am really good at this. You even went the steps further to figure out even more about it and really make yourself proficient and an expert at it, which again, the educator in you. So,
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Joyce, I feel like we have so many wonderful nuggets from today. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
It was an honor and it was a delight to really go down memory lane. Wow, pretty powerful.
Isn't it fun sometimes to look back at those things? I heard you once or twice say, oh, and I forgot about the newspaper thing and I forgot about, and we do tend to forget about some of those accomplishments. So I do, this is one of the things I get out of this every time I do an interview is not only what do you get out of it, but I get so much because then I start thinking about, wait a minute, what about that thing that I did And then it's just a boost of that accomplishment adrenaline, I guess.
Yeah.
And which builds your value and your esteem.
Oh yeah, this is a really shot in the arm to have this whole time with you. Wow.
Awesome, Sauce. Well, thank you so much. And listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below and you'll be alerted when other interviews are published. And if you have any questions for me or for Joyce, you can post those on my website, lifestorycurator.com. That's also where I post all these interviews, which is probably where you are when you found this. So maybe that's redundant. I don't need to explain that to people, but, and then I'll post Joyce's social media information on there as well, because you're going to want to get a hold of her. So on that note, everyone, stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing the stories. Have a great day.